Hey, what up, dope? It's your boy, T-Way Sports and Culture, back to put a little game in your brain and showing love to those doing the same. Go ahead and like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're feeling the content. You feel me? Anyway, so Nelly was just on a recent episode of LeBron James' The Shot podcast, in which he stated that he believes his era was the hardest era to basically become, a rap superstar in. And, there's a lot of people disagreeing with Nelly, basically saying that, no, that wasn't the hardest era. It was the 80s and 90s. But, as I kind of dig deeper into that concept, I kind of tend to agree with Nelly for a couple of reasons. When Nelly kind of started taking over, what was that? That was the early 2000s when Nelly kind of got onto the scene and everything, of that nature. And if you kind of look at the state of the rap game at the time, the music industry, compiled with, what was out there, it was a much different time than the 90s. So, at that time you had, basically the record label still, being the basis of how the rap game was ran. Everything that came out essentially had to go through the, through the record labels. Now, don't get me wrong, around this time, you had mixtapes coming out, you had 50 Cents, you had the Dipsets and everybody else, going on their mixtape runs, but that was only in spite of the industry. A lot of the, the people that were, forefronting that, the 50 Cents and the Cam'rons of the world had already been, released from labels, and they were basically, releasing these mixtape / albums in spite of the labels, to get a buzz and everything out there. So this was still a atmosphere that was heavily ran by the, the record labels and everything. But, what makes it very different is, you had the record labels, basically running the structure, but you also had an influx of street money, right? And you was going to need that at that time, because again, this is when merchandise, you were selling CDs, you were selling merchandise, you needed money to invest into these things, to be able to get off the ground. So, it wasn't like you can do now where you can just, get a microphone, some recording equipment, make a song and upload it for free. No, you actually had to go out there and invest and purchase these things. So, it was a lot harder to get into the game at the time. You know what I mean? It was a lot difficult, a lot more difficult to get in. But at the same time, you had the technology kind of catching up to where, you could be an independent artist and purchasing these things and starting to create music. So, it innately made it a lot more, it made it a higher overhead just to even get into the game, let alone be able to compete, let alone the money you got to pay the radio stations to get your spins. And this is when everything was hand to hand. It wasn't digital. It was all hand to hand, So you had to go travel to these cities, travel to these radio stations, call these people, call these radio stations, really get out there. So you really had to put your money in and invest into what you was doing, right? And, look at the competition at the time. You had, Nelly, who eventually came out of left field. You know what I mean? He was coming out of St. Louis, an unrepresented area at the time. Was able to get in with Kuda Love and, make his way in the game. But, look at the competition. You had Jay-Z, you had Nas, you had, Lil Wayne emerging, 50 Cent. Nelly is battling it out with all of them. Yes, the industry was smaller than it is now today. In particular, it's everybody a rapper now. It's much easier. Like I said, it's much easier to get into the game than it was at the time. But yeah, man, that competition was thick, man. The more I think about it, the more I kind of agree with Nelly on that. Don't get me wrong, the 90s had a lot of those elements, but it just wasn't as much money involved. The competition was thick as well, but it wasn't as big as it was in the early 2000s. You know what I'm saying? The money really started to flood and come in around the early 2000s, right? And don't get me wrong, the 90s was grimy. It was a lot of pioneering going on, a lot of groundbreaking things going on. But in the early 2000s, I think it was really set up and primed for, the competition to be at its all-time high. With the amount of money that was coming in, with, the certain things that was just, coming to be. It is what it is. So, I gotta agree with Nelly on this. When you kind of break everything down, you gotta look at how things were then, right? And we're talking about a industry that was all hard copy driven, no streams. I know that's hard for a lot of y'all to imagine. An industry that was all CDs. So, to sell 500,000, that was a flop. To go gold at that time, it was a flop. These dudes was competing for high stakes. Triple, double platinum. Platinum will get you in the dough. But if you want to be a big dog, you talking 3, 4, 5 times platinum. So the competition was a lot more amped up, especially than it is now. You know what I mean? Standards were a lot different. So, like I said, I agree with Nelly on this. I agree that was probably the toughest era to really get in and make a name in. You know what I'm saying? That era. And look at a lot of them guys now. They still considered the GOATs and things like that because of what they did then. So, y'all let me know what y'all think. Do you think Nelly is on point with that, or do you think another era is the hardest to get in on? Y'all let me know. Peace.